Imagine a world before cars, before trains, before roads, and before modern cities. Now imagine that one animal could completely transform the way humans traveled, hunted, fought, communicated, and explored the world. That animal was the horse. But here's the fascinating question. How did humans convince a powerful, nervous, wild animal to trust them? And perhaps even more importantly, why did humans learn to trust horses in return? The relationship between humans and horses is not simply a story about domestication. It is a story about psychology, survival, communication, fear, trust, and cooperation. Thousands of years ago, humans and wild horses lived in very different worlds. Humans were intelligent predators, relying on tools, cooperation, and planning. Horses, meanwhile, were prey animals whose survival depended on speed, awareness, and the ability to detect danger before it was too late. At first glance, these two species seem completely different, but somehow they became partners, and that partnership changed human history. Before humans ever rode horses, horses were simply wild animals living across large areas of Eurasia. They traveled in herds, searched for food, avoided predators, and constantly monitored their surroundings. For a horse, the world was dangerous. A sudden movement could mean a predator. An unfamiliar sound could mean death. A strange smell could signal danger. This created a nervous system designed for extreme awareness. Horses developed excellent peripheral vision and sensitive hearing. Their bodies were built to react quickly. When frightened, their first instinct was often to escape. Humans, however, eventually discovered something extraordinary. If they could earn the trust of these animals, they could turn the horse's natural abilities into an incredible advantage. But trust could not simply be forced. A frightened horse is extremely difficult to control safely. The human had to learn the horse's psychology. This was one of the earliest forms of interspecies communication. Humans began discovering that horses responded to calm movements, predictable behavior, and consistent handling. A sudden aggressive movement could trigger fear. A quiet approach could reduce it. The human learned to control the horse. But at the same time, the human had to learn to control themselves. This created an interesting psychological relationship. The horse was constantly reading the human's body language, while the human was learning to interpret the horse's. A raised head could indicate alertness. Pinned ears could signal discomfort or aggression. A relaxed posture could suggest calmness. Sudden movement could indicate fear. Without speaking a single word, humans and horses developed a silent language. And this language became incredibly valuable. Scientists believe horse domestication began several thousand years ago, although exactly when and where the process began remains an active area of archaeological research. Once humans began successfully managing horses, the relationship expanded rapidly. Horses could carry people over enormous distances. They could transport supplies. They could pull loads. They could assist with agriculture. And eventually, they transformed warfare. But something psychologically important happened during this process. Humans stopped seeing horses simply as animals. They began forming emotional relationships with them. A horse could become a companion, a trusted partner, a source of transportation, and sometimes a creature that a human would risk their own life to protect. Why? Because cooperation creates attachment. The human provides food, shelter, protection, and care. The horse provides transportation, strength, awareness, and companionship. Both sides gain something. This is one reason the human-horse relationship survived for thousands of years. It wasn't based entirely on domination. It was based on mutual dependence. And mutual dependence can create powerful emotional bonds. There is another fascinating psychological element. Trust under danger. Imagine sitting on the back of a horse while traveling through unfamiliar territory. You are physically elevated above the ground. Your safety partly depends on an animal's reactions. If the horse suddenly detects danger, you may have only seconds to respond. Over time, humans learned to trust the horse's instincts, and horses learned to trust the human's decisions. This is especially important because horses can detect environmental changes that humans may miss. A horse might react to a distant sound. It might notice movement in the bushes. It might become nervous before the human understands why. For ancient humans traveling through dangerous environments, this sensitivity could become an advantage. The horse effectively became another set of eyes and ears. But the psychological relationship wasn't one-sided. Humans also influenced horse behavior. Through repeated training and communication, horses learned to respond to specific sounds, movements, pressure, and commands. Eventually, the human and horse could coordinate their movements almost automatically. This created something remarkable: two nervous systems working together. The human brain plans, the horse senses, the human directs, the horse reacts, and through experience, both learn to anticipate each other. This is one reason experienced riders often appear to communicate with horses without obvious commands. Their movements become extremely subtle. A shift in body weight, a change in posture, a slight movement of the hands, a change in breathing. The horse can learn to recognize these signals. The partnership becomes almost silent. But perhaps the most important psychological lesson from this relationship is that horses taught humans the importance of emotional control. A human who becomes extremely nervous can make a horse nervous. A frustrated rider can create resistance. A calm and consistent person can make communication easier. This is why ancient horse handling wasn't simply about physical strength. It required patience, observation, timing, and emotional regulation. Humans had to learn that controlling an animal didn't necessarily mean overpowering it. Sometimes the most effective form of control was understanding. And that lesson remains relevant today. Modern equine-assisted therapy uses interactions with horses in structured settings to help people develop emotional awareness, confidence, communication, and self-regulation. Why can horses be so effective in these situations? Because horses respond immediately to behavior. They don't care what someone says about themselves. They respond to what the person actually communicates through their body. If someone is tense, the horse may notice. If someone becomes calmer, the horse may respond differently. This can give people immediate feedback about their own emotional state. In a strange way, the horse becomes a psychological mirror. Thousands of years ago, humans needed horses to cross mountains, transport supplies, explore new territories, and survive dangerous journeys. Today, we don't need horses for most of those things. Cars replaced them. Machines replaced them. Technology replaced much of their practical role. And yet, the emotional connection remains. Why? Because the relationship became deeper than usefulness. It became part of human culture. Stories, legends, paintings, wars, migrations, agriculture, transportation, and exploration all contain traces of the human-horse partnership. The horse didn't simply carry humans across landscapes. It carried human civilization into a new era. Perhaps that's why the psychology of humans and horses is so fascinating. Two species evolved with completely different survival strategies. One relied heavily on intelligence, tools, and cooperation. The other relied on speed, awareness, and escape. Yet, instead of remaining enemies, they learned to understand one another. Humans learned to become calmer. Horses learned to become trusting. Humans learned to communicate without words. Horses learned to respond to incredibly subtle signals. And over thousands of years, this strange partnership became one of the most influential relationships between humans and another animal. So the next time you see a human standing quietly beside a horse, remember what you're actually witnessing. It's not simply a person with an animal. It's the continuation of an ancient psychological partnership. A relationship built from fear, patience, communication, survival, and trust. And perhaps the greatest lesson horses gave humanity is surprisingly simple. You cannot build real trust by forcing another mind to obey you. You build it by learning to understand how that mind sees the world. Thousands of years ago, that lesson helped humans and horses survive together. And even today, it remains one of the most powerful examples of trust between two completely different species.